3:45 a.m. Al Dhafra Air Base, United Arab Emirates, 32 miles from Abu Dhabi, a fortress that doesn't advertise itself because it doesn't need to. Al Dhafra is home to over 10,000 U.S. military personnel, F-22 Raptors on 24-hour combat alert, and the kind of surveillance architecture that can read a license plate from low Earth orbit. It is, in every strategic sense, the iron fist of American power in the Middle East. But tonight, someone has decided to punch it. 6 weeks earlier, behind closed doors in Tehran, doors reinforced with Russian security protocols and swept weekly by Chinese counterintelligence teams, the Supreme National Security Council made a decision that defied every rational calculation. With U.S. carrier strike groups tightening their grip on Persian Gulf choke points, and a new round of sanctions strangling Iran's oil exports down to near zero, the generals decided that humiliation through inaction was worse than destruction through action. They called it Operation Dawn of Empires. What made this different from every previous Iranian threat? 2 words: Allied hardware. Through back channels established after Russia's partial isolation following Ukraine, Tehran had quietly received technical integration support for its missile systems. Russian engineers had spent 8 months updating the guidance packages on Iran's Khorramshahr-4 ballistic missiles. Not the crude versions the West had tracked for years, but a modified variant with maneuverable re-entry vehicles, specifically designed to confuse terminal phase interceptors. Meanwhile, Chinese military advisors had delivered a package of 200 advanced loitering munitions, slow, low, near invisible, designed to saturate air defense radar with dozens of small signatures simultaneously before the main strike arrives. The IRGC commanders called it a wolf pack strategy. Small wolves first, then the killing blow. By 3:15 a.m., launch preparations were complete across 9 Iranian facilities simultaneously. Tabriz, 8. Khorramshahr, 4 ballistic missiles with Russian upgraded guidance. Kermanshah, 10. Seju, 2 medium-range ballistic missiles. Isfahan, 6 Sumar cruise missiles programmed for terrain-hugging flight. Shiraz, 6 Haj Qasem hypersonic-class missiles. Sharud, 12 Chinese-supplied loitering munitions in 4 coordinated swarms. A total of 42 warheads and munitions. Not a symbolic strike. A kill shot, engineered by 3 nations, aimed at the heart of American presence in the Gulf. At 3:40 a.m., the IRGC aerospace commander stood before his team and spoke words that would later be replayed in every military academy on Earth as a masterclass in fatal miscalculation. Tonight, we remind the world that empires fall. They were right about one thing: an empire was about to receive a reminder. Just not the one they imagined. Are you feeling the tension yet? Drop it in the comments if you're locked in. We're just getting started. 3:45:01 a.m. 4 seconds. That is how long it takes for the U.S. Space Force's SBIRS constellation, 5 geosynchronous and 2 highly elliptical orbit satellites, to detect, classify, and confirm a ballistic missile launch signature. Not 4 minutes, not 4 hours, 4 seconds. The massive heat bloom from Iran's first Khorramshahr-4 launch hadn't even fully cleared its exhaust rail when automated threat classification algorithms at Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado flagged it. By second 7, trajectory modeling confirmed. Multiple inbound, bearing Al Dhafra, impact window 18 to 22 minutes. Tehran believed they were invisible in the dark. They had forgotten that space doesn't have darkness. What came next unfolded with the cold efficiency of a machine that has been rehearsed 10,000 times and is now finally being switched to live. At Al Dhafra, The Integrated Defense Operations Center exploded into controlled chaos. Every movement predetermined, every action drilled. Within 90 seconds of the alert, all F-22s not airborne were pushed into reinforced blast-proof hangars. Underground personnel bunkers sealed with 20,000 personnel accounted for. Thawed Battery Alpha began elevation tracking on the Khorramshahr 4 cluster. Patriot PAC-3 MSE batteries slewed to bearing 047 northeast across the Gulf. 2 E-2D Hawkeye advanced airborne radar aircraft were already airborne from the USS Gerald R. Ford 200 nautical miles south, feeding a real-time composite air picture. And here's what Tehran's war planners had fatally underestimated: the integration. American air defense in 2025 is not a collection of separate systems. It is a single networked brain spread across satellites, ships, land batteries, and aircraft, all speaking the same data language simultaneously. The THAAD radar doesn't compete with the Patriot radar. They share. Every track is assigned, prioritized, and allocated to an interceptor before the threat has crossed half its flight path. Iranian missiles were being killed on paper before they reached the midpoint of their arc. 3:52 a.m. The sky above the Persian Gulf became something that has no peaceful name for it. Layer 1. THAAD. The 6 Russian upgraded Khorramshahr 4 missiles were the crown jewels of Tehran's strike package. Maneuverable warheads. Modified re-entry signatures. The Russian engineers had been proud of their work. The AN/TPY-2 X-band radar didn't care. At 150 kilometers altitude, the edge of space, thawed interceptors closed at a combined closing speed exceeding Mach 10 and made contact. Not explosion, impact, pure kinetic collision. The warheads didn't detonate, they disintegrated. Tungsten meets steel at 3 kilometers per second doesn't leave much to analyze. 5 of 6 destroyed. 1 fragment cluster entered terminal phase, caught by Patriot 30 seconds later. Layer 2, Patriot. PAC-3MSE. The Sejal 2 missiles came in steep and fast. Classical ballistic arc. Textbook targets for Patriot crews who had run this scenario in simulation 600 times. 8 missiles, 8 interceptors, 8 kills. Not a single one reached within 40 kilometers of the base perimeter. Layer 3. The Invisible Wolves. Here's where it got dangerous. And I want you to pay attention to this part, because this is what made Operation Dawn of Empires almost something more than a failure. The Chinese loitering munitions came in low, below 200 meters, in 4 synchronized swarms of 3, spaced 90 seconds apart. Small radar cross-sections, propeller-driven, nearly silent. They weren't trying to penetrate. They were trying to saturate, to force the Patriot and THAAD radar operators to track 12 simultaneous low-altitude contacts while the Hajj Qasim missiles came from high altitude simultaneously. It was a real tactic, a smart tactic. The F-22s killed it. 4 Raptors already airborne on combat air patrol, armed with AIM-120D missiles and running active AESA radar in a low probability of intercept mode that Iranian radar couldn't detect, swept the loitering munition swarms from the sky in under 4 minutes. The Raptor pilots called their shots with the clinical detachment of men who had been preparing for exactly this. By 4:01 a.m., the final inbound threats were gone. Result? A fuel storage annex on the eastern perimeter damaged by debris. 1 C-130 transport aircraft with shrapnel damage. 8 U.S. personnel with minor injuries. 0 fatalities. Iran had spent years, Russian expertise, and Chinese technology on a strike package that scratched the paint. If you were a military planner in Beijing right now, what would you be thinking? Tell me in the comments. This is a real question, and I read every single one. 4:03 a.m. In American military doctrine, there is a principle that is never stated publicly, but is woven into every operational plan. You do not get to fire at us and define the terms of what happens next. The moment Space Force confirmed the Iranian launch, not when missiles hit, not after damage assessment, Operation Iron Tempest was conditionally authorized. All that remained was the president's formal executed order, which came at 3:58 a.m., relayed via secure link to CENTCOM. The message to USS Gerald R. Ford's strike group was 4 words: weapons free, all targets. The flight deck of a Nimitz-class carrier at night, at combat tempo, is one of the most violent peacetime spectacles on Earth. Tonight, it was not peacetime. The electromagnetic catapult cycled every 90 seconds. Within 22 minutes, 48 F/A 18E Super Hornets and F-35C Lightning IIs had launched, each carrying a weapons load configured for deep strike. JDAM precision bombs, JSOW standoff glide weapons, and HARM anti-radiation missiles targeting radar emissions. That was the carrier group alone. Simultaneously, from Al Dhafra, engines still smelling of interceptor exhaust, 14 F-35A stealth fighters took off heading north. Their targets? Mobile missile launchers identified by overhead surveillance in the hours before the attack, many still in position after firing, their crews apparently expecting American paralysis. They were not paralyzed. From 24,000 feet over international water, the F-35s released Stormbreaker smart bombs, weapons with 3 independent guidance modes that can track and kill a moving vehicle in weather that grounds conventional aircraft. The launcher crews never heard the weapon that killed them. And then there were the submarines. 6 Virginia-class attack submarines, already positioned in the Western Arabian Sea as part of a contingency posture updated after the 2024 Iran-Russia Defense Pact, opened their vertical launch tubes. 96 Tomahawk cruise missiles tore through the surface simultaneously, creating a sight witnessed only on satellite imagery. Dozens of white smoke columns rising from the dark water like a forest of ghosts. Total American weapons committed to the first strike wave, approximately 850 precision munitions. The disparity isn't just numerical, it's philosophical. Iran launched 42 weapons and hoped. America launched 850 weapons and knew. Before a single bomb reached Iranian territory, 10 EA 18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, launched from the Ford, executed a coordinated jamming envelope across a 400-kilometer front of Iranian coastline. Every S-300 derivative radar, every early warning station, every communication node that Iranian and Russian technicians had integrated went white with noise. Controllers in air defense bunkers watched their screens dissolve into static and could not explain why. Then the HARM missiles arrived. 86 AGM-88E arms, guided by the last radar emissions before jamming suppressed them. 34 Iranian radar sites fell silent in under 3 minutes. The Iranian sky was now a room with no walls and no ceiling, open to anything coming from any direction. What followed over the next 34 minutes was systematic and complete. 4:12 a.m., Tabriz and Kermanshah launch complexes. F-35s and Tomahawks arrived within 90 seconds of each other. The reinforced launcher shelters, built partly with Russian engineering consultation, were penetrated by GBU-57 bunker-busting munitions carried by 2 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers that had departed Diego Garcia 14 hours earlier. The underground missile storage chambers that Iran believed were invulnerable became the largest unplanned detonations on Iranian soil in modern history. For 19 a.m., The Russians supplied radar integration sites, a specific set of 8 facilities where Russian advisors had installed the uplink systems connecting Iranian missiles to Russian satellite targeting data. These sites weren't on Iran's published military maps. They were on America's. All 8 were destroyed before 4:25 a.m. 4:27 a.m. Isfahan Missile Component Production Facility. Not a weapons depot, a factory. The machines that made the guidance systems, the halls where engineers assembled the very missiles that had just failed to kill Americans. B-2s, invisible and silent, delivered 16 JASSM-ER cruise missiles through its roof. What had taken Iran 11 years and foreign assistance to build was reduced to structural ruin in 11 seconds. 4:33 a.m., CENTCOM issued the stand-down signal. First wave complete. Dawn broke over the Persian Gulf at 5:47 a.m. By then, the battle damage assessment imagery was already being processed. The numbers, when they were compiled, told a story that no editorial could exaggerate. 16 major IRGC military facilities significantly damaged or destroyed. 34 radar and air defense sites rendered inoperable. 8 Russian-installed targeting integration sites eliminated. 3 missile production facilities structurally destroyed. Iranian ballistic missile operational capacity estimated reduced by 60 to 70% in a single night. On the Iranian side, casualty figures from a closed military society are always uncertain. But what satellite imagery confirmed was that personnel who had been celebrating a successful launch at 3:45 a.m. were not celebrating at 5 a.m. American casualties from the largest single missile attack ever launched against a U.S. military installation. 8 wounded, 0 dead. Let that contrast sit with you for a moment. And here is the part that Beijing and Moscow have been studying in silence since the morning after. The warning worked before the weapons arrived. Iran's military decision-making was disrupted, its integrated command paralyzed, and its Russian-provided systems identified and erased. Not despite Allied involvement, but in direct response to it. The message to any future co-conspirator was encoded in the rubble. You can loan your technology. You cannot loan your immunity. The gun smoke drifted east with the morning wind. The Persian Gulf, that ancient body of water that has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations for 5,000 years, returned to its deceptive stillness. But nothing was still. In Tehran, the political fallout had already begun. In Moscow, analysts were writing classified assessments they would never publish. In Beijing, a military commission was reviewing every assumption in every war game that included a confrontation with American power. Operation Iron Tempest was over in 48 minutes. Its consequences will take decades to fully unfold. The hardest military lesson isn't about weapons or numbers. It's about this. When you allow pride to replace calculation, you invite catastrophe. Iran didn't just lose hardware on that night. It lost the credibility of its deterrence. The belief, held for years in regional capitals, that a sophisticated enough strike might catch America unprepared. It didn't. It never does. Now I want to hear from you. Not just where you're watching from, though tell me that too. But this. Do you believe any regional power, even with great power backing, can fundamentally challenge U.S. military supremacy in the next decade? Write your honest take below. I read every comment, and the best ones I'll feature in the next episode. If this scenario made you think, made your pulse rise, or made you see modern warfare differently, then share it. Hit that subscribe button, because we are just getting started, and the next chapter is already being written. Somewhere in the quiet before a storm. The storm is always quiet, right before it isn't.